Hey folks, Dave Sussman here at Whiskey Politics. Thanks for joining us. You can find me at davesussman.com, the Independent, as well as the Range Broadcasting Network to watch all of our shows, ricochet.com, where you could both watch and listen to our podcast, as well as all of our podcast applications, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, and all the rest of the great podcast applications that are out there. So my schedule is a little bit crazy right now, and I'm not going to share why for probably a couple of weeks. Got something really exciting that I'm involved with right now. I can't discuss it as much as I'd like to. I'm pretty excited. But because of that, my Thursday and Friday is out this week as it was last week. That's why you saw a repeat of our radio interviews that were taped on Wednesday night for our last show. This week, I've got 2 interviews that we recorded both today. They will be released independent of each other because they are both fantastic interviews and both go approximately an hour each. The first one is John Ziegler. You may know John. He is a senior columnist over at Mediaite, an award-winning talk show host, Emmy winner, very outspoken, considers himself a never Trumper, but not in the same vein as those guys over at the Lincoln Project. We're going to talk about all of that. California, Trump, COVID. The man certainly has his opinions, especially when it pertains to the government's response, both federally, state, and county-wide response to COVID. He had it out with the Ventura County Board of Commissioners a few months ago. The video went absolutely viral. I will play this before we bring John on because we will be talking about this and a whole bunch more. I want to get his opinion on Trump. And listen, isn't this election at this point a binary choice? I certainly believe so, but he's got his opinions, and we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the economy. We're going to be talking about Gavin Newsom and a whole bunch more, and I think you're going to find this conversation to be very enjoyable. Please note that his audio was a little bit off, so it is a little bit crackly at points, but I think we managed to get through it. And then look for the next interview that's going to be coming out relatively quickly afterwards with Judge Michael Warren from the Sixth Circuit in the state of Michigan, talking about SCOTUS, the Supreme Court of the United States, and what is happening right now. Enjoy the interview. Cheers.
After waiting for 2 hours and now getting 2 minutes, I'll get right to the point. This board is pretending that for the last 3 months, your emperor, Dr. Levin, has not been against a mask declaration. Now, all of a sudden, we're pretending that masks are everything, even forcing speakers to use masks. I would like the board to take a position. Was Dr. Levin wrong for those 3 months? And if he was this wrong, why has he not been removed? Why has he not been fired for being so catastrophically wrong? Or do you not really believe he was wrong? You're just wearing these masks because it is a signal of your great virtue. Because for the last 3 months, we have not worn them, and Ventura County has done outstandingly well and continues to do outstandingly well because we are not Los Angeles, we are not New York City, we never were going to be any of those things. Ironically, this is one of the few things Dr. Levin was actually right about. He has been wrong about everything. He is the one who told us we would have 400 to 600 hospitalizations a day. He revised that to 200 to 400 a day. We still haven't reached that in 1 day. We're barely over 200 for the entire ordeal that you guys have put us through. We now are panicked over 51 total hospitalizations in a county with 8 hospitals. Can you people do math? Can you please do basic math and understand where we are on this? This is not a crisis. You, however, have created one. You, in an effort to try to prevent all death, when we've had 43 deaths, have now ended all relevant life. And you should all be ashamed of yourselves. And this will never be forgotten, ever be forgotten. You will all be held accountable eventually, in this life or the next. You all better hope there is no hell, because when you die, that's where you're going. And guess what? You're not going to be dying of COVID either. Thank you.
John Ziegler is a senior columnist over at Mediaite. He is a talk show host, a 2-time Talkers Magazine Top 100. He's also a filmmaker and an Emmy Award winner. And you can find him on Twitter at the best name on Twitter there is, Zygmunt Freud. Welcome, John. How are you?
Dave, nice to talk to you. I'm glad someone likes my Twitter name because I don't like it, but I'm glad you do.
Must have had to have chosen it. My undergrad degree was in psychology, so it hit me.
Well, I understand it. It's an old college nickname at Georgetown, off of the fact that Zig obviously would have been my natural nickname. And when I chose it, I stupidly didn't even think Twitter was going to be that big of a deal. So I didn't even put much time into it. And I turned out to be rather wrong about that, as Twitter has changed the world for better or for worse.
It certainly has. Let me ask you this, because you're prolific on Twitter. I mean, you're one of my favorite guys to follow, and everybody should be checking you out. But let me ask you I was thinking about this yesterday, right? You've got a whole cottage industry now of blue check marks that really make the news, much of which is promulgated up to the mainstream news, and it's what we're talking about. What happens to that cadre of blue check marks, the influencers, if you will, when the next technology hits?
Well, that's a really good question. I really do believe that the reason why Twitter became as influential as it is that whether this was by design or not, I don't know, but they very smartly appealed to the whole ego of the blue check marks, giving blue check marks mostly to media personalities and celebrities, and basically creating a caste system. That's basically what Twitter is.
Yeah.
You either have a check mark or you don't. I happen to have a check mark. Why, I don't know. I'm surprised that I do, but because I'm not a celebrity, but because of the way they did it, they created a situation where media members really loved Twitter, especially at the beginning, because it was a way for them to show off how many followers they have and how much influence they have. And it really created almost a snowball effect for how Twitter evolved. And unfortunately, it has had an enormous influence on the news media, because most of these blue check marks, at least many of the most influential, are news media members. And now the coin of the realm is retweets and likes. And retweets and likes are based upon two things: the reading of a headline and popularity, not truth. And so when the coin of the realm stops being truth and it turns into a catchy headline that is popular, that's a problem. In fact, I have had, and this is not just hyperbole, I would say there is a direct inverse correlation to how true my own tweets are and how popular they are. I mean, some of my most popular tweets I've ended up regretting, thinking, oh man, I jumped the gun on that, or that wasn't quite 100% accurate, but it appealed to whatever people wanted to believe at that moment, and it went viral or semi-viral or whatever. So it is a great contradiction of my life that I spend a ridiculous amount of time on Twitter, and I hate Twitter, and I think Twitter is is responsible for almost indirectly or directly almost every major ill facing us politically and socially today, because it has completely changed the nature of the news media. But to more directly answer your question, I can totally see Twitter becoming MySpace once Donald Trump loses and there is another technology to take its place. I totally can see that. However, the blue check marks will go down fighting, because that's why they love Twitter. It makes them feel superior and like they have great influence, and in some ways they do on Twitter, in the Twitter world. But the Twitter world is vastly different than the real world. People need to understand that, and unfortunately, I think many in the news media have forgotten that. I think that if something is popular on Twitter, people think that that must mean it's popular in the real world, and I don't buy that at all. I think Twitter is the real. It has almost no connection to the real world at all.
Yeah. Hashtag Twitter is not real life. But when you do get a viral tweet, and again, you're on Twitter a lot because you're posting all the time, and I get a lot of information from you. And we may not agree on everything politically, but I think you are an honest arbiter of what is going on out there. And I want to get into some of those issues regarding COVID and Trump and California as well, while we have you on here. But let me ask you, when you do post something that has gone viral, then you look back at it in 24 hours and you think, uh-oh, that wasn't all the facts that there was, and certain other information has come out. What do you do with that tweet?
Well, it depends on the situation, obviously, but I generally try to correct the record. I mean, I usually won't delete a tweet, because then that looks like you're trying to hide something or whatever. But I'll generally retweet that tweet and clarify if it needs to, or I'll create a thread underneath the original tweet. I mean, I try to be. I look at my Twitter feed in a bizarre. I don't know how bizarre this is. I almost look at it like, I'm a mini news outlet, and I'm either creating my own content that's clearly my own, or I'm retweeting stories that I would think that I'm interested in, or that my audience, such as it is, might be interested in. It's almost like I'm running a small market radio station where each tweet is a new song. And some of the songs are mine, and some of the songs are other people's, and and what I'd like to, obviously there's millions of other Twitter accounts, but I would like if you followed only my Twitter account, by the end of the day you have a pretty decent idea what happened in certain areas of life during that day. I think that's kind of my goal for it, and I think I achieved that. Whether then anyone appreciates it or not, I don't know, but that's kind of the way I look at it.
Well, I do. I personally appreciate it. I follow a lot fewer people than following me. I'm nowhere near the numbers that you have, and I'm not a blue check mark. But I didn't invest my time wisely in the first 7-8 years of Twitter. I just thought it was an interesting thing, and so I think it was probably a little bit easier to get the blue check mark back in the day. But now I don't even think they're giving them out anymore. But let's talk about some of these issues, because you're kind of in from a perspective of, again, a natural arbiter of what is going on right now. You have vented, you show anger and frustration about the policies that have been implemented both on a state, California, and a federal level regarding COVID. And if we can discuss briefly, you had a viral video. You were speaking at the Ventura Board of Commissioners a few months ago. And we'll play that for our folks. And I just want to kind of get your perspective on then, which is what I think it was in June that you spoke. Okay, so it was the Ventura County Board of Commissioners about the county's health policies in relation to COVID, and at the time there were relatively, and it's still relatively, low numbers. We've had school shutdowns, we've had businesses shut down. Your video went viral. And at the time, I think there was about 44, 45 deaths. I think that's tripled in the last 3 months. We're about, something, I don't know, 146 people have unfortunately perished. Has that increased threefold since you attending the board and speaking? Has that changed your opinion at all?
Not at all.
Okay.
If you look at the statistics, the number of people in Ventura County today who are hospitalized with COVID is actually lower by a couple than it was when I gave that speech. And as far as deaths are concerned, look, no one is saying that this isn't a serious matter or that people don't die. I know this is apparently is news breaking to a lot of people in the last 6 months, but human beings all die. And when we get to be 80 years old, which is the average age or median age of COVID death in this country, guess what? We die at a very swift rate. And there are, I believe, 3 people in Ventura County who have died without comorbidity. And I forget the third one that just happened, but the first 2, one was just 78 or 9, the other 96. So every other person who died Now, that doesn't mean they were going to die without COVID. Let's be clear about that. I am not one of these people that believes only 6% of the 200,000 plus in America have died of COVID. I don't know what the exact number is. It's not 200,000. It's somewhere south of that. It's definitely more than 50% of that, in my opinion. But our health director, Dr. Levin, said that we would have 1,000 deaths in Ventura County in the first stage of this. He said we would need 18,000 ventilators. Ventilators? No one even talks about ventilators. He said we would have 400 to 600 hospitalizations a day. He then quickly revised that to 200 to 400, and the media scrubbed his original wrong prediction. And we currently have just over 50 people total in 8 hospitals with COVID. And let's be clear, that number is not 100% people who are there because they have COVID. Because the first thing that happens when you go to the hospital is you get tested. And if you test positive, regardless of whether that's why you're there, you are a COVID hospitalization. So they won't tell us, because they don't know how many people are in the hospital because they have COVID. So a lot of this is statistical noise and confusion, but I feel as if I've been totally vindicated. And ironically enough, when I gave that speech, the mask thing wasn't even what I wanted to talk about. But I was originally told we would have 3 minutes, and then they cut us literally like a minute before I went on, or maybe 2 minutes before I went on. They said I had 2 minutes, so I totally had to scrap the speech. And so the only point I wanted to make was, hey, morons, we're all pretending today that masks are the be-all, end-all, when for 3 months, this is not an exaggeration, I think you know this, for 3 months, our health director, Dr. Levin, had said we don't need a mask mandate, mask mandates don't work, they're not worth it. And then all of a sudden, like it's 1984 George Orwell, we're supposed to pretend the last 3 months didn't happen, and now masks are the most important thing on the planet. And now I like people being forced to be consistent, Dave. And so you can't have it both ways. Either he was dead wrong for 3 months about this incredibly important subject, and therefore he ought to be held accountable, or this is all bull crap. And so which is it? Could you please tell me which it is? And they actually picked a third option, which is the Fauci option, which was really hilarious, which is, oh, no, he wasn't wrong. He was just lying for 3 months because he didn't want to have a run on masks, which I'm sorry, that dog doesn't hunt. That's not what happened here. That's a lie. And I think it's an important lie because it goes to what the motivation of these so-called health experts are.
Which
they can never admit they were wrong. They're like a religious figure, a papal figure who speaks infallibly, and they can never be wrong. That's not possible.
Yeah.
And that to me is why I'm so passionate about this issue. I'm also against mask mandates in principle because I'm a libertarian. I don't think the government has the right to do this. And if they do, what don't they have the right to do? And when will this ever end? Because I don't have an answer to that either. But the speech was, I had no intention of what I was speaking about that subject. And I had no belief at all that anyone was going to see this. It was a fluke that it even went viral because the way the way they post that video is so arduous and so ridiculous. It's almost impossible for anyone to find it. But someone found it, made a clip of it, and on Facebook and Twitter and YouTube, it did go viral around the world with many millions of people seeing it.
Yeah, no, I think you voiced a tremendous amount of frustration and anger that a lot of people have, especially those people whose businesses have been shut down. In many cases, they've lost their businesses now. They just couldn't survive for 6 months. I don't know if you have kids or not, but my youngest is supposed to be in high school right now, and he's at home. And I think that's definitely we're talking about developmental issues if we keep these kids at home. No sports, no theater, no commingling and building confidence, talking with friends and communicating. All of that is something that I think a lot of people are very frustrated over. But you refer to Fauci, and just today, and this is being recorded on Wednesday, folks, just today, Dr. Fauci responded to Senator Rand Paul. Rand Paul suggested that herd immunity from COVID-19 could be reached at a much lower percentage than Fauci implied. Fauci slapped him down. He says, you're alone in that. You're wrong. You suggest that Fauci is 100% wrong on herd immunity. Why?
Well, one caveat. I don't know if I would use the phrase 100% because we don't know yet for sure.
Okay.
But I believe that the more likely scenario is that Fauci is totally wrong about herd immunity, and that Fauci's reaction is very telling, and it goes right to this issue I talked about previously about masks. And this, what we're talking about here, Dave, cannot be underestimated as far as its importance. This is the seminal question of our time. Okay, there's nothing. This is bigger, in my opinion, than Trump or Biden. That's how big this is. Whether or not, and here's the question, and this is the way that Rand Paul essentially raised it. The question is, cases, hospitalizations, deaths in New York and New Jersey and some surrounding areas have, like Sweden, virtually disappeared. Now, they've totally disappeared in Sweden for 2 months. And, yesterday, New York and New Jersey had a total of 7 deaths. I believe today it's at 9 deaths, but less than 1,000 cases combined. That's 28 million people plus. All right. That is effectively, you have a better chance of dying in a car accident, essentially, over those 2 days. Now, it's only 2 days, but those are usually 2 bad days for data, okay? So the seminal question is, why is that happening? Dr. Fauci's explanation is ludicrous. It's ludicrous. It demands an explanation. It demands an explanation that why are New York and New Jersey suddenly doing so well after having been hit the hardest by far in the country? And why has Sweden eliminated death for 2 months? What's your explanation? Fauci's explanation. He doesn't give an explanation for Sweden because he can't. And I wish Rand Paul would have nailed him on this. But as far as New York and New Jersey, Fauci's explanation is they're just better at masking and social distancing than the rest of the country is. And I'm sorry, I don't even find that to pass the laugh test. That is an absurd explanation.
Are there any metrics for him to use there?
Yeah, that he wants to believe that. That's his metric, because that's the narrative. That's the narrative. Let's be very clear about how invested he is in this. Okay, everyone says, "Well, you're not a medical expert." No. But I'll tell you what I am an expert in, Dave. I am a world-class expert in media narratives and people being invested in myths and how it impacts behavior. And let's be clear, if Rand Paul is right, that New York and New Jersey, and by extension Sweden, where there are no masks, life is virtually back to normal, and they have not had deaths in 2 months, if that's because herd immunity is achievable at a far lower percentage than Dr. Fauci and the rest of the experts told us, that is the most catastrophic mistake in the modern history of science, period. So let's be clear about how deeply invested Dr. Fauci is in that not being true, which is why he got so agitated by Rand Paul. And so that doesn't, now just because you're deeply invested in a narrative doesn't mean that's wrong, okay? However, I think you already implied it, what's the basis for your belief? Are you saying this because you want to believe it, and therefore it's like a religion? See, that to me, this feels very much like a religion. well, we know what the outcome is. I can't possibly be wrong about something so important as the threshold for herd immunity. All of us experts can't possibly have been wrong, because that's never happened in the history of the world. Just ask Copernicus and Galileo. That's never happened in the history of the world where everybody thought one thing and they were flat wrong in the realm of science. It's actually happened all the time.
Yeah.
It's happened all the time because there's this thing called groupthink. And so it is laughable. It is laughable that Fauci thinks that by some magic, New York and New Jersey have just done such a better job. After they got, by the way, this helped them in April, May, and June when they were getting crushed, since they were so good at following directions. Well, why didn't that help them? No. The Occam's razor explanation here, Dave, has nothing to do with human behavior. The simple explanation is, wow, guess what? It is far easier to obtain some level of immunity than we were told. And by the way, I urge people, when you go to Worldometers, which is the website I use most of the time, look at the graph, the case and death graph of New York and Sweden. I'm telling you, it's remarkable. It is remarkable. It is to the day. The charts are exactly the same. And so this is not behavioral. This is about nature. This is about immunity. Now, look, if New York and New Jersey all of a sudden take a turn for the worse, and or Sweden does, unlike Dr. Fauci, I will change my mind based upon new information. But
so is transmissions inevitable no matter what the countries do? I mean, for example, if we take a look at Europe today, they're starting to lock down again. London is locking down. Spain is seeing spikes. They had one of the most strictest lockdowns in Europe throughout the spring. And the rolling 7-day average for COVID deaths in Spain has now surpassed the United States. So is it just a matter of water is going to find its own level with this thing?
That's what it sure looks like. I mean, and everyone always says, well, you're not a medical expert. Well, actually being a medical expert in this situation can be a detriment because of the groupthink and the emotional investment in a narrative. If you have a brain and you look at things objectively and you look around the world, and as I do, and I'm sure you do, many other people do, it is clear that there is virtually no correlation, none in the long run, between how a government acted and what the results are. In the end, it looks to me as if this is going to be a function of basically population density, population obesity, population age, level of immunity, luck, weather, maybe a little bit. I mean, these are factors that have very little to do with what the government is doing, and it's not masks. I've got at least 20, 25 charts on my phone from all over the world and all over the country that make it impossible to conclude that mask mandates have a positive impact on cases, hospitalizations, and deaths. Now, whether they have a negative impact or not, I don't know. Whether they have any impact, I don't know. But I've asked, please send me the chart. Send me the chart of a jurisdiction that had already that clearly shows that after a mask mandate, there were no spikes, no increases, and that it went down in the other direction. Now, of course, you have to understand, if you put a mask mandate in when you're on the downhill slide, like some people did, you're gonna have an artificial example of what it looks like, maybe that masks work, but that's nature. You're just riding the wave on the way down there. I'm talking about, like, here in Southern California, we're actually a perfect example of this, Dave. I have a chart on my phone. Ventura, San Diego, Orange, and LA counties all had mask mandates at slightly different times. Our data, when you relate it to per capita, is almost exactly, all 4 counties, exactly the same. They mirror each other. It has nothing to do with masks. It has to do with the virus being the virus. And I think that's the fundamental problem. The Faucis of the world are deeply invested in the idea that government can mitigate or contain this, because that's what they've built their entire lives around. And this virus is once again proving that that premise is wrong. And I believe that masks are the vehicle in which they're going to pull this off. And I predicted that on Glenn Beck's show on Monday, and Fauci vindicated me today. Because what does he say? Well, it's mask wearing that is why New York and New Jersey are doing so well, not herd immunity. See, the beauty of masks for them, Dave, is masks can perform any function they want. If it goes up, well, we just didn't behave well enough, and it was too late for masks. If it goes down, oh well, finally the mask mandates kicked in, and we've just, New York and New Jersey just do a better job of masking than anybody else. Which, of course, is, living here in Southern California is absurd. Los Angeles is completely masked up. It's all a bunch of liberals who believe in this religion of masks, and it has impacted in a positive way the data at all. In fact, Los Angeles has single-handedly proved that mask mandates don't work. The virus was under control when the mask mandate went in effect.
It only doesn't work when, or I should say, it only works when there's peaceful protests, right? But let me ask you this, because I think anybody that joins and follows you on Twitter would not get a real sense of your politics. You are a self-proclaimed libertarian. You are very critical of this president. In fact, you tweeted today, we'll put this up here on the screen, two of the biggest drags on the USA recovery from this insanity are clearly Dr. Fauci and Gavin Newsom. What do they have in common? They both are greatly enabled by Trump. Trump followed Fauci to become untouchable, and maybe because his son dates Newsom's ex, he's been super soft on him, referring to Newsom there too. So talk a little bit about that, because a lot of people that are, libertarian conservative leaning may be raising some eyebrows there.
Well, I fully acknowledge, Dave, that I am on the smallest political island in America. I mean, there is nobody on my island with me. Because I hate everybody, and I mean, I hate Donald Trump, and I've been a never Trump conservative from the beginning, and I actually blame him for the vast majority of what is happening here, not because he mishandled the virus, but because he allowed a coup. He allowed a coup on his watch, and he did it by enabling Fauci. I think when this is all said and done, whether Trump will ever admit it, I doubt it because of his ego. But he abdicated his presidency to Dr. Fauci. And that was the moment when it was all over for him. And, I think he's actually doing a disservice to his reelection campaign with regard to Gavin Newsom. If I was running, I believe, as bizarre as it is, because I don't like him, I believe if I was running the Trump campaign, I could win this election for him. I really do believe that. And part of what I would be doing is I would be running against Gavin Newsom. I would be using Gavin Newsom as the face of the Democratic Party, especially when Biden gave Trump a gift of putting Kamala Harris on the ticket with him. So now you have a direct California connection here. So if Trump was smart, which he's not, he would be like, even today, Gavin Newsom declaring that it's illegal to sell gasoline cars in 2035 in California.
Yeah.
I mean, that's something that's going to turn off the vast majority of the country. I mean, Michigan, for God's sake. If Trump was smart, if he made Gavin Newsom, this is the future, folks. This is what you're getting with a Democratic president and a Democratic Congress. You're getting Gavin Newsom. He is at the forefront of where the Democratic Party is and where it's going. And if you want to be locked down in a situation where it's impossible to ever get your freedom back, you vote for Joe Biden, because you're actually voting for Gavin Newsom and Kamala Harris. That to me is a part of a winning message here. Now, but instead, Trump has been very soft on. He came out here to California and he almost slobbered all over Newsom and said what a great relationship they have. And I'm telling you, knowing Trump the way that I do, I really do believe it. The only explanation is the fact that his son dates Gavin Newsom's ex-wife, and that in Trump's mind, they're part of the same, tribe. They're part of the same tribe. and Newsom's a good-looking guy, and he's a celebrity, and I'm sure Trump actually envies some of the dictatorial, tyrannical things that Newsom's been able to do that he doesn't have the power to do as president.
Yeah, I hear you, and a couple of things that I would ask you further about on that is that when I took a look at I guess it was a press conference where Newsom and all of the different folks up and down the state forestry departments and interior were talking about the wildfires. Newsom was pushing climate change as the reason. And Trump was talking about essentially the abdication of the forest department in California that has been overrun by the environmentalists and letting them grow. And so I think Trump was pushing Newsom back pretty hard, no?
Well, substantively, yeah, and he was right. I actually believe that Trump was right about that. I mean, for as much of a moron as Trump can be, oftentimes his instincts are not that bad, even in the realm of science. I think Trump's back to COVID for a second. I think Trump has got to be kicking himself because his instincts at one point in this thing were to go in a Swedish direction.
Yeah.
And he lost his nerve because I think Fauci told him 2 million people were going to die. And he just, he decided that he couldn't do that, and Fauci duped him. But Trump also, made some very positive comments about Newsom as a person. But more importantly, he's not attacked him globally for, this draconian shutdown we have here in California and this car thing. I just think politically it would do Trump a lot of good if instead of making Biden his opponent, he made Newsom Harris his opponent, because I think California is way out of step with the people of Pennsylvania, the people of Michigan, and oh, by the way, no college football here in California. You don't want to have college football in Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Ohio. Let's go the direction of Gavin Newsom, because he's part of why there's no college football here this year.
Let me ask you this, because as a self-referenced never Trumper, do you see this election as a binary choice, or do you see it differently than that?
I'll tell you, this has been excruciating for me. I'm somebody who, when this all began, I advised Democrats to nominate Joe Biden because I thought he had the best chance of beating Donald Trump. He was the least crazy of the major nominees. But this COVID situation has dramatically shifted my view. I intended to vote for, not that my vote matters here in California, but I had intended to vote for Joe Biden when this all began, but now I'm not going to vote for Joe Biden now. I look at this election, Dave, and this is going to be a unique analogy or metaphor, but I think it's pretty good. I do Trump as a cancer, and so on the menu we have 4 more years of cancer for the country, which is obviously terrible. And the alternative is a lobotomy combined with a sex change operation, and so which isn't going to kill you. The lobotomy and the sex change operation won't kill you, but you're not going to be the same person you were before it started. Cancer won't change who I am too much, but it might kill me. So,
okay.
So I don't know. I go back and forth on which is worse. On one day I think, you know what? I'll take my chances with the cancer, because at least I'll still have my brain and my balls. And then I think, you know what though? That cancer is really awful. And I guess I put it down to this, Dave. I try to be, I think you know this, I try to be exceedingly objective about all things. I'm not emotionally invested in anything. I change my mind all the time based upon new facts and new evidence.
I see that.
I have a podcast called the Individual One Podcast, which is, anti-Trump from a conservative perspective. It's distributed around the world. And yet, if Donald Trump had shown me anything of real substance in the last 6 months post-COVID, I probably would support him. I probably would, because I even though I hate him, I think he's a cancer. That's how dangerous I think this COVID response has been to the essence of who we are as a country. But Trump came up small and limp. So sorry, I was told there would be balls, and there have been no balls.
So,
And
okay, so from
I,
a policy standpoint, and listen, I hear you, and okay, folks that have been following us for the last 4 years, they know this. They've heard me say it. Out of the 17 primary candidates in 2016, Trump was my number 17th choice. But I voted for him because he wasn't her. I didn't think, I'm a conservative, libertarian-leaning, conservatarian, whatever you want to call it. I believe government should be out of your pocket and your bedroom. But with that being said, I think there's a lot of people that I speak to who are diehard MAGA, conservative Trump followers, and they love the man. And then conservatives such as yourself. I know people, look, we had Bill Kristol on this show. I went on this Weekly Standard cruise 4 years ago, the last one. Okay, Jonah Goldberg and those guys. I see a huge difference, and I'll tell you what it is, between you and the quote unquote never Trumpers, the Lincoln Project type people.
Thank you.
Okay? I know, and I'll tell you why. Because I think that a lot of this that we're seeing coming from the Lincoln Project and those guys is ego-based. They've been kicked out of the Washington, D.C. clubhouse. They're no longer welcome. And, you know, essentially, you know, they've got a cadre of people that are following them. And whatever you think of them, I think they're decent people. I've met with them. I may disagree with their approach. You call balls and strikes, and you said, I can change my mind at any time. Donald Trump has been more conservative than I think anybody ever thought he would be. Talk about justices, and we've got one coming up here this weekend. Talk about taxes. We talk about regulation and regulatory reform. The pushback against pop culture and this primordial Marxist ooze that we're seeing leaving states like California and New York. He seems to be kind of the boy holding the finger in the dike of this dam. Do you not see that? I think you do, because you've tweeted about this in certain ways over the years. And that's why I think of you as being different than the DC Never Trump circuit.
Well, thank you for recognizing that. You know, I used to be part of that whole group, literally. I mean, I used to take part in their conference calls. And when at the beginning of the Trump presidency, the meeting of the concerned, I think they called it. And I found them to be delusional, but mostly well-intentioned at the time. And then I realized, wait a minute, hold on. As this is going on, what's really happening, and it's more than just ego, although ego is a part of it, this is becoming a minstrel show. That's what the Lincoln Project has become. And what I mean by minstrel show is that the purpose of the Lincoln Project is to be able to condemn Trump no matter what it is, even if it's not directly related to Trump. My God, the Lincoln Project came out against fireworks on the 4th of July this year. I'm not kidding. I mean, anything that is deemed even remotely in favor of Trump, they are inherently against. Why? Because they have fallen in love with the admiration they get from liberals on Twitter and in the media. They are invested in their appearances on MSNBC and CNN. And what is the source of that? The source of that is them. They are providing therapy for liberals by showing liberals how right they are on everything, because here they are. They're the principled conservatives, the principled Republicans, telling them how right they are, even on crazy things like you're not allowed to have a Supreme Court justice 2 months before an election. You know, Kamala Harris is a great VP candidate, which is ludicrous thing for a Republican to say. You know, they're in favor of all sorts of crazy things, government shutdowns, mask mandates. I mean, these are the most liberal, progressive concepts, anti-conservative concepts you could get, and they're in favor of them. Why? Not because they really believe it, but because they're virtue signaling to the left, because that's their gig now. It's a minstrel show. It's grifting. And it's really sad that Bill Kristol has become part of that, because Bill Kristol was somebody I used to admire, who also always condemned grifting on the right.
Yeah.
Well, he's become what he was condemning, only he's grifting to the left. It's one thing to grift to the right if you're a conservative, but when you grift off the left, that's really pathetic. And
so you write for Mediaite, you wouldn't write for the Bulwark?
Actually, I did write for the Bulwark for one article, and I learned an awful lot about what frauds those guys are. They threw me under the bus in the most cowardly, pathetic, progressive, politically correct,
What happened?
cancel culture fashion of all time. I mean, it was it was very eye-opening. That was the moment I realized, oh my gosh, these guys are a minstrel show for liberals.
What happened?
Because I wrote a column about the Trump cult. It was a good column, well received. This actually all happened because under California law this year, I was limited to the number of columns I could write for Mediaite, as insane as that is.
AB5, yeah.
Right, AB5, which has now been revoked. And so, the Bulwark had indicated they were interested in having me write for them. I wrote for them, and this is actually a fascinating situation, because what transpired was that the left hates nothing more than for someone that they find dangerous to gain credibility in their minds, and so in their minds the Bulwark is more credible, I guess, because they're the good conservatives, right? And so some of my enemies were appalled that I had been given a platform on the Bulwark, and so they started attacking me on everything I'd ever said in the history of my life, of course having no idea of the context or anything about it. It went all the way back to the David Foster Wallace Atlantic cover story from 2005. I mean, I'm not kidding. This was insane. This was just absurd stuff. And I'm at a party with, I think, the New England Patriots were playing a playoff football game back when we actually had parties, and I'm responding to some of this stuff on Twitter, and the left went bananas on me because I called David Foster Wallace's, who I knew very well because he shadowed me for 3 months for that 23-page cover story. David Foster Wallace, who's an icon on the left, committed suicide not long after that article was published. In fact, his article on me was the last chapter in his last book, Consider the Lobster, and I refer to his suicide as cowardly and selfish. And as somebody who's considered suicide myself, I have a family. I believe that suicide is cowardly and selfish, and that somehow sparked this thing where they told me, "Oh my gosh, we don't like policing social media, but what you said was totally inappropriate." And I said, "What are you talking about?" And I emailed Bill Kristol, and he agreed that it was totally inappropriate. And here's what it was. It wasn't what I said was inappropriate. It's that they needed to sacrifice me to their masters on the left to show that they're still they're the good Republicans. And so that really left a bad taste in my mouth, that what a bunch of frauds these people are. And that it really wasn't about the truth or what was right or wrong. It was about appealing to and placating the left. That's all it is. That's what the Lincoln Project and the Bulwark, that's all it is. It's therapy for the left. And it's greatly detrimental. And this current Supreme Court situation is a perfect example. I mean, my gosh, conservatives should be salivating at this opportunity. This is never going to happen again.
Well, I think most are. And we're talking about, two groups of people that are so tiny in comparison to the rest of, the conservative party. But it comes back to my previous question to you, because I believe you're an honest arbiter, and we may not agree with everything, but I do believe you. And my question about this being a binary choice, that
right.
You have.
Let me address that.
Please.
Let me address that. Let me address that. I'm glad you brought that back up, because it was a compound question, and I only addressed one element of it. As far as the binary thing, and I kind of already addressed this, where I said if Trump had shown me anything in the last 6 months, I would have supported him. But I actually believe, Dave, and this is, I think, where we're going to differ. I believe that almost everything we're seeing from the left right now is because Trump is president. I believe that if we had had a rational president, that we would not be seeing, the freak out on the left. The left would not be going so insane. We would not see the lockdowns. Hell, I truly believe with every fiber of my being that if Hillary Clinton was president right now, we would not be locked down. That the narrative would be, wow, the government got this under control. The numbers could be exactly the same. The narrative would be, wow, the government got this under control. We bravely faced this challenge. It's time to remain America and move on, because they would never have done this in an election year.
But are those decisions made by states?
And who are the governors of the key states?
Right, but why would Newsom do something differently no matter who's in the White House?
Oh my gosh. If he shut down California, he would never have shut down California the way that he did for as long as he did if Hillary was running for re-election, because it would destroy. I mean, California is an enormous part of the economy. It would destroy her re-election bid. He would get. Here's why he wouldn't do it, Dave. He would get crucified by his own party. Do you not understand that Trump is the prism through which everybody sees everything in this? Everything. And it would be presumed, if Hillary was president, that this was being taken care of properly. But because everyone on the left presumes, understandably, that Trump is a moron in science, then they see everything through that prism and they think, well, we have to do it ourselves. We better shut down because, and by the way, there's no political cost to that because our guy is not running for re-election. And so therefore, I believe that, I said this at the time, I believe conservatism would be far better off right now if Hillary Clinton had won. Because one, we would own for sure the Senate and probably the House. We lost the House in 2018 because of Donald Trump. We would not be about to lose the Senate because Hillary is running for re-election. We would not have, in my view, 6 months later, any government shutdowns at all.
John, I gotta be respectful of your time. How much time do you have available here? Because you've just opened up a Pandora's box that I want to delve into.
Another 10 minutes.
Okay. All right. So that approach right there is, if Hillary won, conservatism is on the ascendancy. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. Nobody has a crystal ball, but I can tell you this, that the Middle East peace that we're seeing happening right now would never have happened under Hillary Clinton. We saw that what John Kerry and Obama were pushing with Iran, enabling them to push Israel out to sea with nuclear weapons. Would we have seen North Korea? Would we have seen a pushback against China, which was deserved after 30 years of placating them by both the left and the right? I got to say no.
You might be right, but I have to tell you, and this might be really myopic. One, I don't put that much stock in all that stuff because he's going to be out of office in a few months and all that's going to just go by the wayside.
You think Trump loses?
Yeah, if Trump loses, it's irrelevant. And more importantly than that, in my view, COVID's all that matters. I mean, I mean, this is a strike. COVID is a strike at the heart, the brain, and the balls of this country, and we are about to lose all three forever.
What about the trade? What about the trade deals? What about everything else that we've been seeing for the past 4 years?
Nothing matters.
Nothing matters
except COVID. COVID is everything.
But COVID is temporary. We will look back at this 1918, 1919.
Whoa. No, okay, this is where we're going to differ. COVID is not temporary. If you think COVID is temporary, you are naive. COVID is forever. If the narrative, which unfortunately it's going to, partially because Trump is so inept, if the narrative that government salvaged 2 million lives and held us all together, and the government is where we need to rely on if we have a bad flu season, and that government shutdowns for 6 months when they tell us it's to flatten the curve, if that is accepted as okay, stick a fucking fork in us. It's over. The American experiment is over. because we gave up all of our freedoms over something that did not warrant it, that did no good, that did more harm than good. And because of Trump, see, a real president would have fought back against it and would have the credibility to at least alter the narrative. Trump is not capable of that. And so now the Faucis of the world have us by the balls. And that's why Governor Newsom feels like he can do anything he wants now. He can sign an executive order banning the sale of gasoline cars in 2035, and it gets no blowback. That's partially because of Trump. And so, to me, this idea that COVID is temporary is fanciful. I wish it was true. I wish it was true. I believed at the beginning it might be, but now this is a battle for the essence of America, and we are about to lose it. And by the way, even if Trump wins, and I'll be clear, I mean, I think I've already said this, there are times when I find myself rooting for Trump because it's the only option that there is of some sanity on this. I mean, Biden has no freaking clue about the virus. Biden is terrible on the virus, way worse than Trump is. But
it's not binary for you. You seem to try to, half the baby, right?
Well, no, but let's be clear. This is why it's very complex. If Trump wins, I don't think California gets out of this for another 4 years. I mean, why would Newsom ever let us go?
Because the economic implications, you've got people leaving.
He doesn't give a shit. He doesn't give a shit.
Okay, but what happens when he takes a look at the revenues at the the Treasury?
He doesn't care. He's got the ultimate excuse now. I was saving lives, and I did such a good job of it.
Yeah.
And he can't lose re-election because no one from his own party is going to run against. By the way, this is an aside. I can't believe there's not one prominent anti-lockdown Democrat who wants to run for governor. Because if you were an anti-lockdown Democrat who ran against Newsom, I think you could beat him in 2 years. You can't beat him as a Republican. But my point is, from my own life standpoint, my children's life standpoint, I believe that if Trump wins, we are locked down for another 4 years. Because now the left will need to prove to everyone that it was Donald Trump's fault and that they're the only ones holding us together.
So let me ask you this then. I guess we're heading into our last question, John. President Ziegler, you're sitting behind the Resolute desk in the Oval Office. It is February 2020. And your advisors come in and say, Mr. President, this is what is happening. This is what has happened already in China. If we do not make this decision now, you risk losing 2-3 million, possibly more lives. What do you do?
Well, this is obviously all in 2020 hindsight, and so I understand that that's an unfair advantage, but I never believed, even back then, that 2 or 3 million lives was on the table because I believe that one of the great mistakes that these people always make is the mistake of extrapolation. They always presume the worst case scenario and they extrapolate, and even a small error in that extrapolation gets exponential over time. So I never believed in the 2 or 3 million theory. But the way I think, to me, if I was Donald Trump, the first thing he should have done is prepared the country for this is going to be bad. Not try to downplay it, not try to say, this isn't really happening. It'll fade on its own. Use the word hoax, even though that's not really what he meant. That
he was referring to the media. Yeah.
Right. You have to be straight up. You have to be straight up with the American people and say, this is going to be bad. However, we as Americans are special. This is a special country, and we are not going to destroy our way of life in the long term here in order to do something that may not be effective. And the first thing Donald Trump should have done, this is going to sound bizarre, but I strongly believe it, he should have said, ladies and gentlemen of the United States of America, I am told that one of the biggest factors in vulnerability here is not just age, but it's obesity. And I am urging you, and I will be the first to do so, to lose weight. I'm going to go on a diet and exercise program. You're going to see a new Donald Trump in the next few months. I'm going to lose weight, and I need you to do the same. Because if we all lose weight, we have a much better chance of surviving this virus. We need to protect those that are most vulnerable, which are the aged. If you need to, say goodbye to your grandparents and hope for the best, but this is going to be bad. There's no sugarcoating it, but we have faced greater challenges in the past, and we will face this one together, and we will emerge victorious. But we're not going to let the virus defeat us. We're not going to let the virus destroy who we are as a people.
Yeah.
None of that happened because Donald Trump is a coward. Donald Trump is a moron. Donald Trump was too afraid about his own reelection effort because he thought that was going to destroy it. And so he pretended that it really wasn't all that bad. And so he lost all his credibility. He lost the moral high ground. He lost everything that the presidency is instilled with. And that was always my greatest fear was, what about Donald Trump in the middle of a real crisis? And unfortunately, that turned out to be dead right.
Yeah.
He was uniquely unsuited for that crisis. And here, without any preparation, Dave, I just gave you a far better speech than Donald Trump ever dreamed about giving.
John,
at the start of this.
I was with you 100% until, you you feel that I don't believe he's a stupid man. I don't necessarily agree with his communication style. I don't like him tweeting as much as he does. He doesn't need to be a bull in the china shop. Many times he turns off a lot of people, and there are more people that don't like him than do like him. But I believe that his policies and his strengths are his strengths, and pushing back against this Marxist push right now that we're seeing from the left. And that's why I believe it's a binary choice. But I agree with you, John, 100%. I agree with you. The diet and exercise component is missing from our national dialogue. That's huge.
And look, I understand and respect where you're coming from, certainly more now than I would have before COVID. I mean, I think there's at least somewhat of an argument. But, this idea, you mentioned the Marxism element. Let's take the racial riots. What's the argument that that gets better in a second Trump term? I don't see any argument for that. In reality, because this is the way human beings work, if Biden is elected, that's all going to go away.
But when did that start, John? It didn't start during Trump's administration. It started in 2014. Pigs in a blanket, fry them up like bacon. That wasn't Trump.
Okay.
That was BLM 6 years ago.
Well, okay. I don't think it's going to get better if Trump is reelected. It will only get better if the people involved in that think, and it's all perception because human beings are all about perception. If they think all of a sudden we don't live in a racist country because, Joe Biden is president instead of Donald Trump, that's going to change everything. Now, if Trump is reelected, it's actually going to make things worse than that. And I'm not saying this is a reason to vote against it.
But they're using that to hold the country hostage for votes, just like UTLA, the teachers' unions, are holding the children hostage for their leftist causes.
I agree with you totally. It's wrong. It's unjust. I'm just telling you what the reality is. I've never understood the argument. If Trump can't stop this now, how's he going to stop it as a lame duck president?
But you're talking about placating them by voting for this other guy.
I'm not saying that's why you do it. I'm just telling you, to me, it's not an argument in favor of voting for Trump because I don't think he's going to be able to do anything positive about it. You see that there's a difference. I'm not saying that's why you vote for Biden. I'm saying that the unrest is not a reason to vote for Trump because he can't make it any better.
And the policies that I've talked about, economic, geopolitical, trade, those don't matter for you.
No, they absolutely matter. Absolutely. But he's still a cancer. He's a cancer. And so, I mean, unless if I'll tell you what he could do to get my support, as if my support matters. If he came out now and said, Fauci is totally wrong. He has been sidelined. He is no longer speaking for my administration. He will not be part of a second administration. I believe that we are on the verge of herd immunity. I am going to revoke federal funding for all states that have certain lockdowns. And if he was really aggressive about that, you know what? I'd say fine. But that's not going to happen. You know why? Because Trump's ego won't let him give up this mythology that he saved 2 million lives.
As we finish, Yeah. As we finish up here, John, you were on with Glenn Beck a couple of days ago. Glenn was the biggest never Trumper in 2015-16 there was. I mean, realistically, because he's got one of the biggest megaphones out there. What was your discussion line? Unfortunately, I haven't had a chance to see the interview there. He's come around to Trump, right?
Oh yeah. No, I mean, by the way, I've tweeted the link to the entire interview. It's a good interview. Glenn and I have had a complex relationship, on the air and off the air. But I mean, we've had a lot of interaction off the air. I've interviewed him about the Trump situation. I've seen his evolution, firsthand. He and I have, at one point, we got in a big fight about it. Off the air, but we've been able to reconcile. I have put Glenn in a slightly different category than some of the other people who have suddenly become Trump supporters, because Glenn employs a lot of people, and economically it was just not possible to be economically viable as an anti-Trump conservative while Trump is president. It just wasn't possible. And so I've given Glenn more slack, but I have given him heat off the air about it. I try to be realistic about human beings, and Glenn was facing a unique challenge. And so while I don't agree with him on everything with regard to Trump, I at least understand it. And I try not to let it impact our relationship too much.
John, if I understand what you're saying that his political perspective has changed for self-serving reasons. Aren't you in essence calling him a grifter for the right now?
I mean, people can make their own determinations about that. I personally think that Glenn does really support Trump. I don't think he's faking it. Okay. But I do think that there are economic realities. This is a business, and that's what this is. I don't see part of what, maybe this is the best way to end this interview. Part of what makes me different is that I don't look at this as a business. I'm not in a business. I don't care. I don't care if you like me. I don't care if you hate me. It doesn't matter to me, because I'm not making my living. I make a very small amount of money based upon what I say, and that gives me enormous freedom. I have freedom that no one else with my platform has. That's what makes me unique. I'm the last man in America who doesn't give a shit, because I don't need to be loved. I don't need to be liked. I don't care.
Yeah. This is why we wanted you on, John, because I do believe you're an honest arbiter and you call things as you see them in the moment, and you can change because you do see things. And I enjoyed this. This could have gone on easily for another hour, and I greatly appreciate it.
We'll do it again sometime. Let's do it again sometime.
Yeah, I'd love to have you back on. I really would. And everybody needs to follow John, not only on Twitter at Ziegler Freud, but at Mediaite.com. Mediaite. He's a senior columnist and, again, talk show host. He's got his great podcast as well. We'll have everything below here on the Chiron for you so everybody can follow John Ziegler. Greatly appreciate you taking the time, my friend. That was enjoyable.
Thanks, Dave.
Cheers. Thanks, John. And as I said during our interview, I do believe that you are authentic in your opinions and your beliefs, and while I disagree with some of them, and I certainly believe that this is an election that should be a binary choice for conservatives and liberals, that we are taking a look at the policies that are being implemented here. And I'm just going to say this. I would have said this to John on air, but listen, the president is a placeholder for 8 years, whatever it is. The policies that he implements directly impact the country, both economically, both with geopolitics and trade, both our culture. All of them are combined based into the president's vision. And when I take a look at what is now being purported by Biden and the far left, which are holding him up like a puppet, they are the marionettes, he is just dancing to their song. We are looking at two vastly, widely different directions that this country can go in. And so while John is talking about COVID being, essentially a lockdown for the next 4 years, I disagree respectfully, John. I believe that the lockdowns, especially in states where the numbers are much, much less than others, are going to be all but diminished, and the economy will pick up in a better way than by raising taxes and increasing regulations. That's the choice that we have to make this election. But you may disagree. Let us know what you think in the comments section, YouTube or The Independent, Range Broadcasting, or ricochet.com, as well as all of our podcast applications. Appreciate you taking the time listening to us or watching us wherever you may be, and watch for a follow-up interview. It was recorded the same day today with the Honorable Michael Warren, who's going to be getting very deep into SCOTUS and what we could expect to take place over the next few days to few weeks. Dave Sussman here at Whiskey Politics. Thank you so much for joining us. Greatly appreciate you taking the time. Cheers.